Thank you very much and good morning. I want to welcome everybody here, and first I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're on the original territory of the Mi'kmaq people. It's always a great pleasure to welcome special guests to Prince Edward Island. And I'd like to make a warm welcome and reception to my great friend, the Minister of Finance, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. Our tourism industry is at the very heart of our community here on Prince Edward Island. And as we all know, it had a very difficult time over the last 18 months. It's a good day because the incredible work of Chrystia Freeland, the good work she's been doing over the last 18 months. She knows just how important the folks who make up our tourism industry here in this province are. The building here, this building has been here for more than 100 years. What started as a repair station for cars is now showing off some of the very best of our food and art scenes that could be offered in the country. It's places like this that makes Prince Edward Island one of the best places in the world to live. And as we start to come through this pandemic, it's places like this that folks from across the country, and I believe around the world, are going to have a great interest in living here. And getting our economy back on track means getting our tourism industry back on track. And we have the very lady here that's going to explain some of how that is being done and will be done. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce to you the Minister of Finance, the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, the Honourable Chrystia Freeland.
Well, thank you very much, Lawrence, for that warm introduction. And I do want to say, Lawrence and I really are friends. We've been working together since 2013, when I was first elected. It's too far back to say when Lawrence was first elected. But I have to say, he was so kind and welcoming to me as a rookie MP. He really helped me become comfortable in the House of Commons and in Ottawa. And we kind of bonded because, you know, I'm the Member of Parliament for University Rosedale, which is a downtown Toronto riding. But shortly after I met Lawrence, I explained to him I'm the daughter of a farmer and grew up on a farm in northern Alberta, and he decided I might be okay. It's true, right? Yeah, he thought that was good. That made me an okay person. So thank you very much, Lawrence, for the introduction. It is so great to be here at the Founders Food Hall and Market. What a beautiful place you have. And Lawrence and I are really looking forward to grabbing some lunch afterwards. And I'd like to start, as Lawrence did, by acknowledging that we're here on the traditional territories of the Mi'kmaq. When COVID-19 hit Canada, tourism was particularly hard hit. And I know so many people here today know that firsthand. Borders were closed, public health restrictions were put in place, and that had an immediate and devastating impact on the tourism sector. Now, in Atlantic Canada overall, and here on the island, you put in place highly, highly effective measures to fight COVID. And I want to say, as a visitor from Toronto, and I've been double vaccinated, and I got tested when I arrived after midnight last night, so I'm allowed to be here, and I had a negative result, so I'm safe. But I do want to just let you know how much your action fighting COVID has been admired in the rest of the country. I can't count the number of editorials in Toronto newspapers which have said, geez, if only we were able to put in place the kind of measures that Atlantic Canada in general and PEI in particular has put in place. And, you know, myself, as Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, I've recently gone to a couple of international summits. And I've really been proud to talk about the extremely effective measures you had here. And I know that's because you have outstanding public health authorities, but I think it's also because you have a really strong community. And people were willing to make sacrifices to take care of themselves and their neighbors. I salute you. Canada's really proud of you. So really well done. I know, though, that those measures, which saved lives and saved your local economy. You didn't have the kind of lockdowns which we experienced in Toronto, the level of school closures. But I also know that they came at a cost. And probably the sector that has borne the brunt of those necessary and effective measures more than any other is tourism. The federal government took rapid action when COVID hit. We rolled out emergency support programs, and those programs have supported millions of Canadian workers and kept businesses going. And we know that that was the compassionate thing to do, to put those measures in place. But as finance minister, let me tell you, it was the economically smart thing to do as well. We knew we had to act to keep the economic muscle of Canada from atrophying, to keep families from going bankrupt. And so we did. To date, tourism, arts, and culture workers and businesses and not-for-profits have received more than $15 billion through the wage subsidy, rent subsidy, and CEBA. The April budget extended many of these support measures through to the end of September because we knew that COVID was still with us and people and businesses needed a little more support to finish the fight against COVID. But we know that more support is still needed and the fight is not over yet. And we know that the tourism sector particularly needs to be supported. So when I tabled the budget in April, we announced that there would be $1 billion specifically to support tourism. Last week, my colleague, Mélanie Joly, the Minister of Economic Development and Official Languages, unveiled a big part of that tourism support, a $500 million package, the Tourism Relief Fund. And I am here to announce one piece of that specifically targeted for you. The Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, I think well known to people here, ACOA, will be delivering $48.5 million of the Tourism Relief Fund to tourism businesses and organizations right here on PEI and in the other Atlantic provinces. This is direct support that will help tourism businesses and organizations adapt their operations, finish the fight against COVID, and get through to the other side. La semaine dernière, ma collègue Mélanie Joly, ministre du Développement économique et des langues officielles, a dévoilé un élément essentiel de soutien que nous apportons au secteur du tourisme par le biais de récent budget fédéral. Le nouveau fonds d'aide du tourisme de 500 millions de dollars. Et aujourd'hui, je suis ici pour vous annoncer que l'Agence de promotion économique du Canada Atlantique, l'APECA, versera 48,5 millions de dollars de ce fonds aux organismes touristiques de la région de l'Atlantique, y compris ici sur l'île de Prince-Édouard. Ce soutien aidera directement les entreprises et les agences du tourisme à adapter leur activité au cours de la reprise. The tourism business is dominated by small and medium-sized enterprises, and they employ many of the individual people who have been hardest hit by the pandemic. That includes many Indigenous communities across Canada that rely heavily on tourism. That's why we're dedicating 10% of the total tourism relief fund to Indigenous tourism projects. So I'm here today to encourage all businesses in Atlantic Canada to look at one additional program. And I think this will be particularly relevant for seasonal businesses like businesses in the tourism sector. This is a program that is retroactive to the beginning of June, and it is the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. The hiring program helps businesses hire back workers or increase the hours of workers who are already working at those businesses, but maybe they had to reduce the hours during COVID, or to raise wages. Maybe people took a pay cut to help the business get through COVID. This is a program that can offset up to half of new labor costs that businesses are incurring as part of the economic recovery. We really understand that there's still a lot of uncertainty and it feels risky for businesses, you know, like the great businesses we see around us here in Founders Hall, to really believe in this reopening and to bring on more people or give your workers more hours. And so what we're saying with this program is we're going to share that risk. We're going to encourage you to bring on more workers. We're going to help out. So if your business qualifies, please, please apply. The Recovery Hiring Program is delivered on the same platform as the wage subsidy, just to make things easy for people. So if you're a small business, you're using the wage subsidy, take a look. This could give you even more support if you are bringing on new staff. Canada is such an amazing country. And now is the time to support our Canadian small businesses that have worked so hard and been so resilient throughout COVID. Our government has been clear from the very beginning of the pandemic that we would do whatever it takes to support Canadians and to support Canadian businesses. And that is what we're going to continue to do as we finish the fight against COVID and as Canada, Canadians, and the Canadian economy come roaring back. Lawrence said right at the beginning that PEI is one of the most beautiful places in the world and that everyone in Canada is going to want to come live here. He's proud of his island, as he should be. And I want to say to fellow Canadians who maybe are not lucky enough to live here, the summer is a great time to come visit PEI. I hope many, many Canadians will be doing that this summer. I've brought one of my kids along today, and we will be exploring some of the delicious food here in Founders Hall with Lawrence later on. So I am very optimistic about PEI. I'm very optimistic about tourism and the small businesses here. I'm optimistic about how our country is finishing the fight against COVID and coming roaring back. Thank you so much for your time. Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Chrystia. And I have, of course, had the privilege of sitting with Chrystia. It'd be a year ago last January when this issue came to light. And it was such a pleasure. I think being the daughter of a farmer didn't hurt her one little bit, being the Minister of Finance. I might be a bit prejudiced that way, but the fact is she understands basic problems, and sometimes in government that can be an issue. Chrystia Freeland knows what makes things work, from the grassroots up, from the clay up, and that means so much, no matter what you're talking about. Chrystia, it's a great privilege to have you here. Thank you for all that you have done. And I think that brings to a conclusion this part of the program. And Chrystia, you're available for questions. You're going to take mine too, I think, and that'll be good.
Lawrence can answer questions. He's been doing it for a long time.
All right, so it'll be one question, one follow-up. Thank you.
Check 1, 2. Sheehan Desjardins, CDC-TEI. Just wondering, how ready does your party feel for a possible federal election?
You know, I think that if you are a politician in a government which is a minority in Parliament, you need to be ready to face voters anytime. And I was certainly very aware of that as we worked hard to get the economic measures in the fall economic statement passed in Parliament. It was a real slog. It took longer than we had hoped because we knew Canadians needed that support. And it took us a while to get the budget passed too. And, you know, those money votes are confidence votes. And, you know, Lawrence and I and our colleagues were conscious every single time that we had to be ready. We had to be ready for other parties not to support us, and we had to be ready to face the voters. And I try to conduct myself so that at all times I would be ready to answer for my actions to my constituents. I know Lawrence does the same thing.
I do.
And why come to PEI in person today as opposed to doing this, say, over Zoom?
Well, because it is now allowed to travel. And I mentioned the precautions that you have in place at your airport. And I do want to say to the public health authorities, you know, I was on a flight from Toronto last night. We arrived pretty late after midnight, and there were quite a few passengers. The public health people told me it was double the number of people they were expecting. And I thought they did a great job at the airport. People were really, really polite. They were very nice. There was a little baby on the plane, and they let the parents and the baby, you know, go to the front of the line. I thought we were treated very well, very professionally. I was tested. The results came in very quickly. And I admire so much how effectively people in PEI and your public health authorities are managing public health. I experienced that myself. Obviously, we wouldn't travel here until that was allowed. And until very recently, I haven't been doing any events in public. I did my first public event in Toronto, where I live, last week. Because the restrictions have been pretty serious, and it's important for us to follow those and lead by example. But now that we're being allowed by our public health authorities to move around a little bit more, to talk to people directly, you know, I have to say, for me as a minister, it's so useful to talk to actual human beings in person, to hear from them how things are going, to hear from them what they need, to see the people who are here, to talk to my colleagues in person.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
I think it's important to a public health authority and the province itself and the premier of the province. He adhered to the public health restrictions to a letter, and that's why we're able to be so successful here in Prince Edward Island.
All right, next question.
Hello, Mike Robauer from The Guardian. So in chatting with operators on the island here a few weeks ago, they were telling me that the recovery hiring program isn't quite as flexible as the wage subsidy and rent subsidy programs were, and they were worried that it's not as helpful to them. So I wonder, with things winding down with the wage subsidy and rent subsidy, is there any chance that those will be extended further, or is it just a complete transfer to this new recovery hiring program?
So that's a great question, Mike. And let me first of all say that when it comes to the recovery hiring program, we were very conscious in designing it that, you know, it has a very specific purpose, which is different from the purpose of the COVID business support programs. You know, the way I think about the COVID business support programs is they're like disaster relief. You know, the disaster COVID hit, and we put measures in place to let people and businesses survive. Another way of thinking about it is, as a country, we decided to have parts of our economy go into hibernation, and we need to put those businesses on life support. The recovery hiring program has a different and more specific purpose, which is it is going to be useful to support businesses who are hiring new workers, increasing hours of existing workers, or increasing the wages of existing workers. And that's not going to suit everyone. There are going to be some businesses who just kind of kept going, but maybe didn't lay people off, or who don't see a need to hire new workers right now. Because we're aware that, the hiring program, it's there also to provide an incentive. I want businesses to hire back people. My objective overall, and Lawrence's too, is the throne speech promised last September 1 million jobs. And that's, if you said to me as finance minister, what's your single biggest objective? I would say to get to those 1 million jobs, to get everyone who lost a job during COVID, or maybe a young person who graduated during COVID, didn't get a job, to get them back to work. And the hiring program is designed to help do that. But I do appreciate, Mike, that there are some businesses for whom the wage subsidy and rent subsidy, or actually you can keep on getting the rent subsidy, but that the wage subsidy is better. And that's why you can choose as a business. So I urge people, and that's why we put them on the same platform. Go onto the platform, check it out, see which is going to give you more money, the wage subsidy or the hiring program. As Lawrence said, my dad's a farmer, and I know that farmers and fishers and small business people are very smart and very good about managing their businesses. People are going to figure out quickly which program suits them best and make that calculation. And as the government, what we're saying is pick the one that gives you the most. But then you asked a second question, Mike, which is, are we considering extending the wage subsidy and rent subsidy? As you know, in the budget, we did two things. We said those programs are definitely going to run until the end of September, until September 25th. But we also preserved for ourselves the authority, and that authority is in the budget, to extend those programs further if economic conditions required it, if economic and health conditions required it. We said, we'll look at how the economy is doing, we'll look at the health situation, and we're committed to doing whatever it takes to support Canadians and Canadian businesses, and we'll be true to that. And that's exactly what we're doing now. In fact, it's something Lawrence and I talked about just this morning, is getting his sense of, do we need to extend those programs or not? We're going to look at the economic situation, especially looking at employment, unemployment, and hours worked. And we're also looking at the health situation. And I have to tell you, Canada is doing really well in the fight against COVID overall. PEI particularly brilliantly. But when we look at some other countries, say the UK, the Netherlands, even the United States, we're seeing a real resurgence of the Delta variant. And so that's something we're watching as well. We're going to be fact and data-based in our decision.
Given that you were bringing up some other countries there, with the U.S. sort of announcing that they're not opening their borders to us the same way that we are to them, is that changing any of our plans as far as our openings?
Our decision was based on our own public health situation and also on a scientific judgment about people who have been double vaccinated and have been COVID tested and are getting additional tests, and the danger or not that they pose to Canadians. And our public health authorities are confident that people who have been double vaccinated and have had a negative COVID test, that we can allow them into Canada without risking broader public health. And so that data-based, that science-based decision is the one we've taken. And I will say, we're talking about the tourism sector here. It's not going to be a bad thing to have double vaccinated Americans, and in due course, double vaccinated visitors from other countries come here and enjoy the beauties of the island.
All right. Are there any more questions? Okay. If there's no more questions, that concludes today's press conference. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Very nice to see you all.